next time I got the intro.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Kodiak Shack podcast. Today we have Pako Benitez. He's back. He's back on the podcast. This is our first time we've had someone come back on the podcast aside from Rain, so I dig it. We've got Bender here, and I, your host Vader, am always here, whether you like it or not. So Pako, thanks for coming back and chatting with us. You've had a lot of stuff kind of change over the last couple months since we've talked. So you want to give people updates on the merge and other things you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Going back to the beginning, I can't even remember. It was probably one of the first, 5 episodes that you had. Mm-hmm. I don't know what guest number I'm on. I probably should keep track of that. Yeah. But it's a pretty good award. I'm the first repeat offender.
That's right. We're happy to have you too.
So thanks for having me. So let's see, what's been going on with me? Well, I'm retired, so we're recording this on Veterans Day, and I am actually like a card-carrying veteran of the U.S. military now. So that's pretty exciting news for me.
That is good.
Yeah, I've been busy with a grown-up job, so I have a real job now. So I have to figure out the joke is when you retire, you're supposed to figure out what you're going to wear to work every day, but since my job is, I travel a lot, but I'm not. I work at home in my office, and that makes my clothing choices pretty easy most days. So,
yeah,
especially to get dressed from the waist up these days for most meetings.
Yeah, just some board shorts and then a collared shirt.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah.
Well, and for anybody who hasn't been paying attention, obviously, Pako runs The Merge, which is an awesome newsletter, comes out every Sunday, and solid content. He, stealing his words, but he pretty much boils down and synthesizes all the information that's useful to have, and then puts it out there for us. And Bender and I and multiple people on the ops side are reading it as well, and it keeps us smart on stuff. I dug the Taiwan 101 and the breakdown of that, because honestly, I was saying underinformed is probably an understatement, but and then he's also working at Shield AI, which is the grown up job. Is that what that is?
Yeah,
right
that's my grown up job. That's right.
Yeah. And then, but the thing that I kind of want to make sure we hit on is you spoke at some conferences, right? I think was it AFA?
Yeah, I was actually on a panel for collaborative combat aircraft and autonomy at AFA in September, and then I was a panel moderator at the NDIA's Air Armament Symposium about next generation air dominance weapons. So that was about an 1.5 hour panel I moderated. That was fun.
Yeah. So kind of breaking it down, I don't know what the numbers are. I've been to one AFA, so Air Force Association conference, but I mean, there's thousands of people that go to that.
Yeah, I want to say the attendance number. This one was the most highly attended one, and I want to say it was something in the 14,000 range. And I'll tell you, I wasn't expecting go into the room for the panel, and we kind of like, hey, just be here at this time. We'll give you your mics and meet at the door. And we walk in, and this room has well over 2,000 people in it, like waiting for us to walk on stage to have this panel. Like, I was not expecting that. I was expecting maybe 200, not 2,000. Yeah. So that was a little of a sticker shock.
Yeah, I bet. Well, it's funny. I think on a much smaller scale, like orders of magnitude less. The first time I was a mission commander at like a Red Flag or a Cope North or something. And I'm like, whatever, I brief all the time. Like I brief my 8 best friends, and then I stand up there as a mission commander. I'm like, oh, geez. So I can only imagine that was probably exponentially more. So.
Yeah, it's even more fun. I don't know how many international mission commander gigs you've had to do. Those are special, extra special fun.
Oh yeah.
I got some pretty funny stories about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have something similar. If you want to tell one, we'll trade stories on this.
All right, I'll tell you a debrief.
Okay.
A debrief of my mission commander upgrade. So there I was way back when, and we were in the UAE, and I want to say there was I don't know, seven. I want to say seven different nations, mostly Middle Eastern, but we had some French people there as well. And lo and behold, the mission for this international LFE from my mission commander upgrade is going to be this like compound complex CSAR with helicopters. We have an escort package. There's actually people out in the desert we have to go pick up. Pretty legit red air. And so we brief up the plan. It's like, the easiest plan is the best plan. So we keep it stupid simple. We go out there and nothing happens. We didn't pick up the guy. Someone else had to come pick him up afterwards. We come back and I'm like, man, what a failure. I'm going to fail this ride so bad. So we get back in and we had kind of like the pre-mass. The White Force was a French commander, and he'd been there forever. And I asked him like, hey, where's the rescort guys? Like, oh, they left. What do you mean they left? Like, they didn't come to the debrief? Like, they're not coming to the debrief. Like, you have to debrief without them. I'm like, well, they need to be here because like they're supposed to pick up the guy. Like we basically had a find and fix location to go get, Jack, like in the first 5 minutes of this hour-long vol. And I want to know what happened the next 55 minutes. So they're like, yeah, do it without him. I'm like, okay. So I'm just going to wing it. And so I'm kind of on the stage. And again, this international stage, multiple, probably several hundred people in the audience. And I'm up there trying to tap dance through my upgrade without like a key piece of the information that I know that I'm going to need for the debrief. And, so I'm kind of like talking through it. Here's a scenario, kind of recage everyone. And then I said, hey, where is the survivor? Is he here? And this guy raised his hand. I hear this motion in the back, and this guy raised his hand. I'm like, hey, I have some questions for you. So I start asking him, like, hey, did you hear any of these radio calls? Like, they've been calling you for 50 something minutes. And the guy, he's just like sitting there looking at me, and the guy next to him leans over, goes, and he says, yes. Like, whoa, hold on a minute. Are you telling me that, does he speak English? He's like, no. Could you ask him why he didn't respond to any of the radio calls in like the 55 minutes in this vol that the helicopters have been trying to call? And the helicopters were, I think, Emirati. And this is a French guy, I think, on the ground. And they kind of whisper back and forth. He says his name's not Jack. I'm like, oh, kidding me? Like, so he heard every radio call, but because they're looking for Jack, which is our code name for just the survivor on the ground, his name is not Jack, and so he's like, well, that's not me. I'm not going to respond. And so we wasted several $1 million of jet fuel and hundreds of man hours of people's time based on that one little flaw. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's that
true story. That was my mission commander upgrade.
Yeah. Did you pass?
Yeah,
I did. Very nice. Frustrating, but yes. I'm like, hey, I can't control this. Don't fight the scenario. Like, I'm not fighting the scenario. And then the other problem was I'm like, well, the helicopters knew where you were. Like, why didn't they just land? They saw you, and they're like, oh yeah, they couldn't get close enough. I'm like, well, why not? Like, we did know where it was. I'm like, yeah. Like, well, why did the helicopters just land and pick him up? If we couldn't see him, they couldn't get close enough. Like, well, why? Like, well, there was a ROS there. I'm like, yeah, the ROS is for the helicopter to be in. Like, oh, they thought they couldn't be in it. So they're in a 10-mile wheel around the survivor thinking they can't get any closer. I'm like, well, how the hell are you supposed to pick them up if you can't go in the ROS? Like, yeah, they hadn't thought that far ahead yet. And that's why they skipped the debrief. Like, oh my God, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up.
I love we can't tell people that story can't be shared. The incompetence.
Yeah. That's right.
Multinational military operations.
That's right. We're just gonna move on to the next thing. Let's go get tea.
Well, and then you wonder, like, what were they doing when we have all those like mass briefs and we brief the entire game plan, and it's like, what were they doing? Were they just not listening, or were they, you wonder. I mean, my mission commander upgrade consisted of my instructor, like my the patch. Like, you got to put pen to paper. You got to put pen to paper. Like, and then it goes horribly, as most of them do. He's like, never put pen to paper. And I was like, God, like, I was so furious about it. We were, so our
Simple works. The simpler, the better. And the less you speak, the more weight each word carries and stuff like that. You ever in those briefs and it's like a flight lead upgrade or something, and it's like, hack, and it's like, oh my God, you're like the Micro Machine Man from like those old commercials. Like, dude, everyone stop. Like, you're not allowed to talk for 10 seconds. Like, just talk slower. You're gonna like, if I just talk faster and cram more words in it, I'll check all the blocks. Like, no. Like talk less and transmit the stuff that matters, and then we'll go fly.
Well, like the backside of a chord card when it's just littered with contracts, and you're like, there's like 40 contracts on the back of this card. No one, not even C2, is going to keep track of every single one of these and who is responsible for what. Like you said, like 4 contracts is probably all you really need, and then you'll be good.
Yeah, those are the best ones when you go out and you have your, after the mass brief, you kind of have your, your package briefs and your top offs. So you go, all right, guys, like the 3 things that we have to do right today are this, and this. If we fail to do any of those 3 things, we will all die. This mission will be a failure, and we're going to look like clowns. If we can get those 3 right, everything else is just, icing on top.
Well, and I think that's where you really know who understands the problem set and who doesn't. Who can say, like, here are 4 or 3 or whatever pinch points, versus like, I have to talk about everything because I'm not sure what's actually more or less important to success or failure. Bender, I don't know if I should say which country we're in. Bender, this was the TDY that you planned. That was a total debacle. Not on your part, but on the fact that it was like the location could not handle us showing up. And the State Department is like, you will show up. Can we say the location?
Yeah, go for it. I had a great time, by the way.
All right, so we're in Malaysia. Yeah, it was a solid TDY. What was it? Georgetown shawarma. Yeah. Solid shawarma.
Good shawarma.
You, if you find yourself in Georgetown, Malaysia, but either way. So we're working with all the Malay pilots, and they're obviously like varying levels of like English proficiency, and we're doing like a large force engagement. So it's F-15Cs from Kadena and F-16Cs from Massawa, and then the Malaysian military, like combination of their Hornet pilots. They've got like Hawk or Hawker or whatever that plane is, and but yeah, and so we're in there, and I think I'm running it. I don't know. It's a fuzzy memory at best, but I'm up there, and we have like 3 separate like vulnerability windows for like a 90-minute bowl. But I'm not going to be there the whole time. So I'm like, all right, talking to one of the Malaysian pilots, I'm like, all right, you have the hammer then, and then I'm going to show up and I'm going to take the hammer, and then now like lastly, this person's going to have the hammer, and I like sit down, and one of our really smart younger dudes is like, do you think they know what you're talking about when you say they have the hammer? That's a good point. Like, do you know what an idiom is? Yes. Stop using them. But so yeah, it was pretty comical. Luckily, everybody was on the same page, but it's one of those things where we just get used to our jargon, and then you interact with people who may have a varying level of English competency, and you're like, well, I'm using slang on a language that is a second or possibly third language. Doesn't breed success normally.
I'm reminded of the back in my former life, before I was in the Air Force, and I was in the Marine Corps. There was I was a NCO. One of the things we used to do with some of the younger guys is we do like the peanut butter and jelly leadership thing. You guys ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
All right, that's great. So Bender, you're going to be my guinea pig. So Bender, I want you, so basically we set out kind of a loaf of bread, a knife, a jar of peanut butter, and a jar of jelly. And I go, okay, I want you to lead me. Tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Go.
You actually want me to do
it? Yeah, okay. Like, well. so like it's usually like, okay, well, there's different ways to make it, right? It's generally it'll start something like, well, I like to start the peanut butter, so let's put the peanut butter on the bread. So you just pick up the jar of peanut butter, just smash it on the loaf of bread. Like, oh, well, that's not what I was talking about. Like, well, be clear and concise and correct. What do you want? And so you finally get to the point of like, okay, if I articulate exactly what I want from you, like there should be very minimal questions, and we have a level of expectation between the two of us. So that is a style of leadership. Then you have the style which is like, I don't care how it gets done, just deliver me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and don't break any laws or kill any people, and give me that peanut butter sandwich. So there's a few different styles, but that's always a fun one to walk people through. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because you'll see the different ways and things that people mess it up. Like put the now I've got peanut butter on one slice and jelly on the other. Okay, now put the two slices together. You put them together backwards, or it's like you're like, well, this is terrible. What a terrible sandwich. So you make a big mess. Everyone has a lot of fun.
So many unforeseen variables that you never think of because you just assume a level of competency.
That's right. They should do that at weapons school.
Yeah. Well, that's like, having someone else, how good are my products? Like have someone who wasn't there for the mission planning, like brief this scenario. And it's like, we'll know how well it's all put together if that person can just like derive what our intent is from the products that we provide them.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So speaking of, you mentioned Kadena F-15s. You are now actively flying the F-15C, right? You've had a couple flights?
Raging around. 3 sorties. My last one was non-effective weather, so it's good.
So what was your first impression going from the the Viper backwards technologically in some ways to the C model, but now you're flying there's a tennis court behind you if you turn around. It's
totally different. I mean, obviously it's still a fighter. Luckily, tactical formation, like, turning into rejoins, like it's just flying fighter, which is nice because I almost forget I am flying the C model when I'm like on a rejoin. I'm just like looking at a C model. So I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But like
the references are the same, but it's the relationships are, yeah.
Exactly. And like, you bleed energy a little faster, which actually makes like a rejoin easier. Because if you get hot on the rejoin, you're going real fast, you can just like, when you pull the power back, you start slowing down. Or in the F-16, you're like, oh, this is going to be terrible. And you can't like stop the jet in the F-16 because you'll just climb or you'll go belly up. So yeah, I'd say overall the flying has been good. I mean, I enjoy flying it. It definitely feels more like almost like a boat, or they refer like a Cadillac, where it kind of like just like smoothly floats along the sky, where the F-16, I wouldn't refer to as like smooth, like it was more like very deliberate, where the C model seems like more like flying like a real airplane. I was just talking about it today to Bender. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's by design, right? Like the F-16 was the first fighter designed to be aerodynamically unstable, and so the computers keep it right side up and flying, where the F-15 is cables and pulleys with some basic flight control augmentation, and so it's it could fly with it's a pretty stable airplane. You can put a lot of crap on it without being too you don't have to be too ginger with it. Where I know like the Dash one in the Viper, you have I can keep track. I saw it one day and I'm like, what is that? Like, oh, it's our configuration, all of our limitations when you put things on the wings and different stations. And I'm like, oh my god, like we just throw things on the jet and go fly.
Yeah, 1-2, that thing's a nightmare.
Yeah,
it's almost like it's some experiment just to mess with us, because you're like, it's not even straightforward.
It would be pretty
Everything
fun.
has caveats.
Yeah, I think
it'd be pretty fun to do an experiment where you take 20 different F-16 pilots and all have them research one configuration and the limitations and see what they come up with. Because they will all, I bet you get 10 different answers from 20 different patches.
Yeah, so my last assignment, we were in a multi MDS squadron, so we had F-15s and F-16s in test, and we do a lot of all of our flights are basically mixed formation, and I got a couple of Viper rides too, and the easiest thing is, all right, who's got the configuration? Like, you. All right, that's it. Like, one person's going to look at it, one person's going to make a decision, and we're going to go with that decision. Like, no one else will look at it because you will come up with a different answer. And I think you guys are the experts, having flown the Viper. But I want to say one of the configurations is one of like your air-to-air configuration, where if you're supersonic and then shoot the missile, now you're out of limits, because the new configuration without the missile is like subsonic only. And the jet in theory would go out of control or something, or have some flutter issue. Which I thought that's hilarious. Like, that's completely tactically irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, the plus side, so now knowing a little bit about both, is that in the F-16 you can actually step between and pick whatever missile you want. So that's like hey, make sure you don't shoot that one. Like, step to another missile so you don't put yourself out of control at like the high 30s above the Mach. You know, you're like, sure, that makes total sense. I'll do that. The
that's
upside,
right. In the 15, you can only step between missile types.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
The C model is probably the same as the E.
Well, yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. The thing that was convenient about the F-16 is there was no OWS, so the over-G warning system, which I don't know if that's what it stands for, but that's what I'm going to say it stands for. But so the OWS, like, it's effectively just monitoring you at all times, and it gives you a current readout for your lateral stick deflection and altitude, airspeed, all that stuff. So if you're going 700 miles an hour, it's like you're limited to 6.5 Gs or something like that. And it tells you in the HUD, like, don't pull around 6.5 or I'm going to say you overG'd. Where in the F-16, it doesn't. So like asymmetrically overG'ing the F-16 is like part of the tactic. Like it's not even like, oh no, you just do it. Where in the C model, it's like, this has to be a straight pull or you will overG that jet. And you're like, that's a new thing for me.
I feel like asymmetric overGs are some kind of engineering make-believe thing that they made up just to mess with operators.
Yeah, like you better not do it. Like, yeah, I don't get it because, well, and this is one thing. There you go, Pako. I have the ultimate question for you because you've been around, and this is an F-16 thing, and apparently it was not a Strike Eagle thing. So the F-16 is limited to 5.5 Gs if it has a bomb parent mounted or mounted on like a brew or a tur, if it's an inert or if it's alive. And I don't know why it's or if it's 500 pound or 2,000 pound. And I don't know why it's 5.5 Gs always. Does that make any sense?
So in the F-15E, it's, I'll probably get it wrong, 4.8 asymmetric and 6 symmetric. I think we lost Bender.
Yeah, he'll come back.
He'll come back. Yeah, so those engineering limitations that you see for weapons, they're not engineering limitations 99% of the time. They are fiscal management limitations. So if you look at the cost complexity when you do like weapon certification through Sea Eagle, the Air Force Sea Eagle office is the people who do all that. When you look at carriage, jettison, storage separation, emergency jettison, employment, and you go through all these different considerations, you can, getting to 5.5 or 6 Gs, depending on your airframe, is kind of a baseline. Like it's pretty standard to get to like, hey, I really would like a 7G release for this weapon. Like, oh, that's like $50 million in 10 years. We have to go to the wind tunnel. Like we have to do this, we have to do that. Like, oh my God. And you're like, do you really like, what scenarios are you going to do this? You're like, well, I just would like it. I mean, I could think of maybe one, like, just if I'm feeling like it. So yeah, it has nothing to do with an engineering limit. It's the way that you can't pay for everything. You can't, otherwise we either run out of money, run out of time, run out of resources to do it. So I think the Sea Eagle, I was doing a lot of Sea Eagle stuff, not working there, but kind of working with them on some issues. And the backlog they have of stuff is ridiculous. There's stuff that there was one configuration that we were actually, it's actually, I think, almost done with Sea Eagle now. I wrote the request when I was a captain back in 2014, and it was 2022, and they were just starting to test it. And it wasn't like a very like hard thing. All we were looking for was a supersonic release envelope for GBU-38s. We were 0.95 or something like Mach limited. And we're like, well, this is weird. Like I can drop the bigger one, supersonic, like 1.2 Mach or something. Yeah. I can drop the 500 pound dumb bond version at like supersonic. Why can't I drop the 500 pound JDAM supersonic? I'm like, oh, we have to do we have to go figure that out. So they're working all that. It got stuck in paperwork for hell for a while. And then you have, flight test money. And anyways, it's a process. It's a thing.
Yeah. Well, I look at it as we have, so again, most of my experience is F-16, obviously, but we have F-16s who overG, I wouldn't say a lot, but it's not uncommon, especially when people are doing like low altitude ingress to attacks, to overG.
Oh, yeah.
So how many man hours are we spending on like, oh, you overG'd the jet. Now maintenance has to like take the wings apart or, do some inspections and we could save all that time, but then, how much are we really saving money wise? So I get it. I mean,
I'm convinced that I'm convinced in the F-15, there's like different levels of over G. There's like level 1, level 2, level 3. Then there's like mass items, which is like the fuselage. So you will, I don't know if you have it yet, you've only flown 3 times, you will over G the F-15 at some point. And then the first thing you do, like when you do like your BFM phase, you'll probably have like your AOS, like just to scroll through. So you'll program into your screens. You scroll through, it's like over G, you bring it up and you're like, okay, level 1, no mass items, like continue. And then, over G is the second time or the third time, like, all right, we're doing something wrong. Let's bring it back. But if you have mass items or like a low, I'm pretty sure level 1, no mass items is like the engineering buffer to go like, hey, be careful.
Yeah.
But when you get to like, hey, it's level 3 on like, several items and mass items, you're like, oh, like that's like probably bent the jet. Like,
Yeah.
I've heard of guys, a couple of like strike eagle guys, doing like a emergency recovery to like avoid hitting the ground, and they spike like 10, a little bit over 10 Gs, like right out of Top Gun Maverick. Seriously.
Yeah.
They bring and it's all like over G, and it's like the whole AOS page is just lit up with over G. Like, well, that jet's gonna be down for a little bit. Now they have to pull the panels.
Yeah, so. Like 130% of the
exactly.
like allotment.
Yeah, I want to say that's what it is. Like if it's a level 1, it's like, I don't know, 100 to 110% or something like that. Level 2 is like 120. I don't know. It's been a while.
But yeah, I've looked at that, and I think I was talking to Bender about it. Like, I'm just relegating myself to, I'm just going to have weak brake turns, because it's just having flown side stick that moves 1/4 of an inch for literally a decade. And now they're like 2/3 stick travel to a known stick position. I'm like, that does not make sense in my brain. Like I don't have like this innate currently ability just to like find the same spot over and over without overshooting to an over G. So I'm like, 6.5 Gs is probably all I'm going to do in a brake turn, and then I'll make it up, in the control zone. But so yeah, it's cool because it's very different.
The amount of time, because it's the F-15C and the E are cable pulley with hydro assist with some computer augmentation. Bender's just man, he's just hurting trying to get back into this conversation.
Close some apps in that.
He's in stealth mode now. He's F-35 guy. we can't see him.
Yeah, there he is. Sorry,
he's
everybody. Back. This is going to be my nightmare to edit. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So the amount of time, and you're probably starting to see this, like in a teaching someone to fly the F-15 to fly it good, like max perform the jet within visual range, is like thousands and thousands of hours of studying and just thinking through how to do this, and those skills actually all atrophy, right? Where like in the Viper, no, I'm just gonna pull.
Yeah.
Like we'll just skip to the good stuff. I'll tell you, like the E model is different because it has CFTs and pods, unless we take the pods off. But generally we fly with CFTs all the time, with like one or two exceptions right now going on in the real world. So when you can't fly the E model the same as the C model, even though it's kind of based on the same flight control system, but because of the way that the weight on the jet is, and it's a much heavier jet, if you pull the stick and you do the stick mechanic just right, the G number it literally just flashes for like 1/20th of a second. It'll spike that fast, and then it'll come right back down. So you can pull like an 8G brake turn is a really good in a Strike Eagle, but how you get that with the stick position, there's a thing that's called inertial overshoot. And so when you get past that 3/4 position, if you pause just right and you're at the right airspeed and the right weight, and you pull the stick just right, the jet will actually snap about 50 degrees a second. The nose, it'll track for about 1 to 1.5 seconds, and then it'll slow down, and your G will bleed off. But it's fun if you do it right, because you can really whip the nose around one time.
Yeah.
And it does some other weird tricks just based on the weight. But yeah, it's definitely not. It's really hard to be good, and it's really, really hard to stay good without doing it all the time. And it's not a flying club. We have missions to do. So when people go out and like, we're just going to do BFM for the next like 6 weeks and be awesome at it, like, no one cares.
Yeah.
No one cares but you and the bar, man. Like that's not gonna win or lose the next war. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding is, I mean, they even say it to my face. They're like, hey, you can't just like pull and stay awake now. You actually have to fly the jet. And I'm like, yeah, that's becoming apparent, because it's different because if you pull and you now set too much units of AOA, like cockpit units of AOA, the jet stops doing what you want. So you're like, this is, it's not like I get more infinitely. I get more to a point, and then it's diminishing returns, and now you're just hurting yourself. And I'm like, I'm not good at any of this. So it'll take a little while.
Yeah, have you gone through the AHC where you're basically flying it by feel?
That's well, because I was not effective. The sortie, my 2 sorties from now will be that one, and it's dual, which I was looking forward to being solo, but apparently when you could put the jet out of control, it's probably best to be dual.
Yeah, the AOA thing is it definitely feels different at different AOA regimes, and you start to get a feel for it, and then you realize like, oh, those are actually just crutches because it's based on my weight, airspeed, and altitude. It's like, and so the faster I go, those rules don't apply. If I'm slower, it changes. If I'm higher, the air density is different. Doesn't matter. If I'm heavier, it changes. Doesn't matter. I'm like, oh, they're crutches we used to teach like new guys. But when you go out, turns out when you go fly like BFM, everyone's in the same configuration every time we do it. So that's kind of just become a rule.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things, the buffet that you don't really experience in the F-16. It's actually been a little reassuring, like around the final turn and you're in the light buffet and you're like, hey, son of a gun, that's, it's kind of just like they say the jet talks to you, and it definitely does. Like it advises me how bad I am at flying the C model. So
yeah, when you get real fast in it, it'll tell you that it doesn't like to go too fast. You're like, I am actually a little scared right now.
Yeah. Well, they say the eagle roar that you get just from the air, like traveling over the canopy. I was like,
yeah, it's a thing. It gets loud.
Intense. Yeah. Hopefully I'm nice and high and fast, but that's, what the F-16 doesn't get to do as well. So so
you get when you do your like your tactical intercepts, you're getting the high 40s, like 1.2 Mach, 1.4 Mach, somewhere in that area. I've seen those guys kind of on a commit, and then you go out down to like 20,000 feet, recommit back up to 40,000 feet, and you're like, geez, it's like a flying yo-yo.
Yeah. Well, that's like the stuff the Raptor does too. Like, Bender and I were in Red Flag, Alaska, and it was one of those like 4 F-16s with 1 Raptor in the lane, and the F-22 he's like same thing. He's in the 40s. He's just doing work, and I watch him leave down, like just descend pure vertical down into the 20s, and then pass us, and he's like, hey, go shoot those guys. And then by the time we're turning back around, he's back in the 40s, like passing us again, and I was like, this is insane. Like, I don't know how these planes do this,
I did did a red air vol back when I was a weapons officer, and the very few times I get to fly red air as a break, and it was a fight tank fight with it was a mix of Strike Eagles and Raptors. We had 2 squadrons kind of deployed together, and I forgot what the numbers were. I don't know, it was probably like a 8v8 or something like that. When we had tankers, and it's all right. So after the first fight, we go over. I'm like, all right, everyone. I told it's like, pinch your gas is red air. I want to take all of your extra gas. So we end up getting off the tanker, probably 25,000 feet with 30,000 pounds of gas because we have tanks. Like, all right, we're going to be the high flash flyer, and we're going to sit on 3 consecutive PK misses, and we're just going to drive straight. Like, okay, like I want to see, like, I'm DLO shaping here for as Red 1, right? So we get up to it's a Strike Eagle with tanks and captive missiles, so it's got a lot of drag. But eventually, we get up to 48, 49, 50,000 feet, and as soon as you crack the wings, you lose 5,000 feet in 10-mile turn radius. So we kind of time it so we're facing the right way. It's like fights on. We're at 50,000 feet, right at the quote operating limit in that configuration, and we're PK miss, like PK miss, and we see again we can't. As soon as we crack the wings, we're gonna fall out of the sky, so we're just gonna go straight, and we see this Raptor. We're like, oh, tally! Like we can't really turn right now, and this Raptor, he's probably like 10,000 feet below us, and he just does this like vertical stern conversion on us, and it's like kill, Strike Eagle, bullseye. It's like PK miss, like gun, kill, like track, like all right, we're dead. And so we go to turn, and it's like, hey, we're falling off left. That's kind of our comm as we crack the wings left and start falling out of the sky. And he just like plugs it in the blower and just goes, just zips away. I'm like, dude, that was amazing. And that guy could easily, and you guys probably seen this, they can get way above 50,000 feet.
Well, I was
they have the aerodynamics and the power to do it. Yeah.
I was going to ask if he was converting from high to low when you were at 50,000 feet.
No, even if it was, I wouldn't tell you that because that's outside of their TO. But,
that's true.
Yes, I do know that. I do know of a story of a real world mission that had some dip clearance issues, and the squadron weapons officer was the guy leading it, and he's like, "Well, I'm just going to take off and go into Class A airspace." Like, huh? So he takes off and goes completely vertical up to above 50,000 feet out of the country's like jurisdiction airspace, and then just leaves.
Hey.
Like he's within like the aerodrome, like airspace confines, and just goes vertical up to 50,000 feet. Like
that's crazy.
Well, that's a technique. Like that is a technique. He got in big trouble when he got back, but I was like, well, made a call.
Yeah. I mean, hey, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So the one thing that we kind of talked about in text offline was, so we talked to Vermeer, which is Brian's stream from Vermeer, where they're doing like the swarm and all that. And either we talked about it or you sent me an article pretty much, or you were posted about it maybe, about the how complex swarm really is, like a true AI swarm is. So can you kind of explain like exactly when someone says swarm, what they're trying to say, and then why it's such a big ask?
Yeah, so I think I know what you're talking about now. It was a mob versus a swarm. That's not a swarm, it's a mob.
Yeah.
those words mean things. It's kind of like, and I can't remember the math, but when you have the number of points in a system, it scales like logarithmics or exponential, whatever word you want to use. So if you have 2 points, so you have like say a flight lead and a wingman, there's only one interaction, right? And now if I have 3, and I forget how the math works, the point is when you get to like 10 things, there's like 50 interactions. And the more that you go up, it becomes this like hundreds and hundreds of interactions. And the point is like, it's kind of like back to the mission commander discussion we had, being a 2-ship flight lead and a 4-ship flight lead, it's not like it's twice as hard, right? It's 10 times as hard.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. The amount of variables and considerations to manage something with some kind of, coherence and effectiveness. And there's a reason why we kind of settled on as like 4 ships. We don't really have we don't go out there and fight as 6 ships because that is orders of magnitude even more complex. Like, hey, we can just delegate this stuff down into these sub packages. Turns out we figured this out, 100 years ago in aviation. Hey, about 4 jets is good. More than that, it starts to get really, really complicated, logistically and tactically. So that's what it's about. It's when you look at like these drone light shows and things like that, they're not collaborating or coordinating with each other. They're being controlled and directed individually in mass by a single like point. So that'd be like, what if you had like a 30v50 DCA and none of the people that were flying on blue side could actually make decisions, and the AWACS was directing all 30 airplanes and everything, where to go and what to do and how to do it. That's kind of like what most of this stuff is. If you put a lot of quadcopters in the same piece of sky, like they're probably not even controlled by the same person, and so that's actually a mob, right? And that was kind of my point. Like if you're looking at something that's actually network collaborative autonomy, NCA, that is where you get to like wicked complexity. And I tell you that there's, it's a niche, and we're getting better at it. But there's probably like, the amount of people in like the U.S. defense industrial base that have the expertise and the know-how and the knowledge to do that. There's not many. And I'm not talking companies, I'm talking people, just people. Like the universities, the whole academic system to build the people who can even understand and how to do this, and then you have to mature them and experience them into that market. Talking with someone the other day about some form of this with autonomy, I was like, you realize like how many fighter pilots there are in the Air Force? There is less than that many people in the entire United States who know how to do any of this, and that's not the good ones. That's just total.
Yeah.
Right? And you go like, you want the joke is like, you want to hire the guy who's designing what the shape and the color of your Facebook app button should be, or do you want to hire the guy that's like better than the guy that Tesla hired to build their like auto driving algorithm. Like, which one do you want to work for you?
Yeah. Well,
And
and
it
how
turns
do you,
out that's not cheap.
yeah. And how do you hire those people? Because that's the tough part. Like, as a DoD organization, how are you able to pay in a manner that's competitive with Tesla or SpaceX or, you know, because those are some pretty cool problem sets, you know, like the military is cool problem sets, but I mean, those
patriotism only goes so far, right?
Yeah.
These are all conversations that are I'm involved with the Air Force right now, and you know, we go out and recruit top talent, and we compensate top talent so they can produce top tier stuff, right, for the warfighter. But at the end of the day, the government has to buy it, right? And so when you look at the government acquisitions systems and how they buy things, they're not buying based on quality or value. They're basing it off of cost. And they go, well, like it's happening more and more. I would say every new defense company that's kind of advanced technology is kind of fighting this right now, which is, you know, we are hiring some of the best people in the world to do this because it literally does not exist, and we're doing it. And you go, great. Well, how much does it cost? Well, let's look at your labor rates, and then oh, your labor rates are too high. We're not going to pay for that. Like, well, so let me get this straight. So what if, like, let's hypothetically, a company found a way to solve world hunger. The government, and this is what's wrong with the government acquisitions process, they would go, okay, well, instead of going like, well, how many people die every day? You know, say it's 2 million people die every day, and we can get this in the field in a month. And then from then on, like, we'll save hundreds of millions of lives. They go, well, how long did it take you to make it? How much money did you put into it? And as they start, like, let's do the cost analysis to figure out, it's like, dude, I solved world hunger, and you're talking about, like, how did I manage my time and engineering headcount to get to this solution, not the value of the solution itself. So there's a massive cultural disconnect between, I would call it, your defense 2.0 companies and their business models, and the way that government traditionally buys stuff. And so that's why you see, like, the primes, you know, they live off of cost plus contracts, which is whatever. So all the risk is on the government. There's no risk on the companies. And so what you see is a lot of program bloat, whether it's like headcount, so time, resources. So you'll see, you know, this program, it was supposed to take, 5 years and this much money, and it took, 8 years and 50% more money. Well, it took more money because they probably hired more people. And so again, their costs are going up, and they just charge the government. And that cost plus, is usually it's a fixed profit margin. So say it's like 12%. So if they cost, and they do all the costing analysis, and they go, we hired 10 more people, we'll add this to our costs. And guess what? The bigger cost, the percent's the same, but the cost is bigger, then you get more money, right? So you're incentivized to have a larger headcount and not really be efficient and deliver stuff. There's a program. I have a friend of mine in another company. There's a program he's working on, and their technology is ahead of what the Air Force had budgeted for, and they're actually getting in trouble from the program manager because they're ahead of their milestones and they're saving the government money. And the program manager is getting in trouble because, like, well, my metrics of how I am graded as a program manager is managing this program, and to that it means I am on a burn rate for the money I'm obligated, and I'm hitting the milestones at the time that I predicted they would be. Like, wait, so we're actually overperforming, and it's a bad thing? Like, yes. Like, no. That, like, there's hundreds of these stories going on every day. It's just a cultural problem. But yeah, so that's one of the things. And if you build a company off of a cost plus contract, like Lockheed Martin's the biggest defense company in the world. I want to say right now they have 130,000 employees. Like, if they didn't live off of cost plus contracts, there's no way they would have 130,000 employees, right? Yeah, because they can afford to grow that headcount because they can just pass that back with a cost plus contract. If you take like Boeing right now, they are a company, all the primes, they're built off of a cost plus model. So they have a large headcount. they went and bid a fixed price contract, which is like, when you go to the store and you buy an iPhone, you don't buy the iPhone based on how much money it costs Apple to build it, and then, add 12% or whatever it is. You go, this is the price. If you go, yeah, that's a good price based on what, the value that I'm going to get out of buying my iPhone, I'll buy the iPhone. So Boeing's switched that for a lot of their defense programs to try to gain market share by incurring risk from the government. So in a fixed price contract, the contractor has all the risk. If it goes over that price, like, it doesn't matter. The government's not paying for it. They're only paying what they said they're going to pay. That's the point of a fixed price. So your MQ-25, the new Air Force One, which is a VC-25, I believe. The blanking right now. There's like 4 programs that Boeing had aircraft programs that Boeing had bid fixed price contracts on to win, and they've lost billions of dollars. And I think was it last week or week before in the merge, I broke it down and was like, they're losing is like $1 million an hour for like 90 days straight, 24 hours a day, $1 million an hour. That's their burn rate right now on these like 4 aircraft programs, because they're a cost plus company model bidding on a fixed price to try to win some market share. And it's kind of tanking their stock right now.
Well, and it makes sense. Like there's no reason for companies who have that moat and that ability to maintain their market share. Why would they do that? Like, why would they take that extra risk when the cost plus model already exists and they're one of the biggest names in the space? Like, how do we get away with from that?
Yeah. So what you'll see is a lot of the new companies, I would say, I can't think of one off the top of my head, a new company, a defense company that's been started in the last 5 years, 10 years, call it, that does cost plus. Like everyone has sworn off cost plus contracts. For a startup, it makes no sense because you're limiting your revenue, right? You're trying to deliver value, gain market share. If you're a blue chip company like Lockheed Martin, like, yeah, you can afford to just go, yeah, cost plus, we'll just, keep the lights on. It's like an S&P 500 stock probably, so it's got its stable. It's not a growth stock. So there are different phases of a company, and I think those models work for different phases of that. So if you want new people in the market, you got to have the business models that align with the newer companies that are coming into the market. It's the same way. It's not just defense. It's just economics, right? So like when you get into, you can talk about the consolidation of defense and all that, and how, if you like to talk about innovation and just like the different stages of a company or an organization as they grow, how they innovate actually changes. And it's pretty fascinating. So we like to think of like, a lot of like garage lab kind of innovation stuff, whether it's like the 2 pizza rule from like, Jeff Bezos, and there's a few other models. At the end of the day, there's a point where a company switches, and the way that they innovate is they don't actually do the work. They innovate through acquisitions.
Yeah.
So like Apple is a great example. Like we think of them as like, bleeding edge tech and just delivering just amazing like products. The reality is almost everything that they've done is through buying other companies that had that tech and they just integrated it.
Yeah, like Beats.
So Apple in their history has acquired more companies than Lockheed Martin in their entire history.
That's wild.
So I did the math, like they're up to about 80. So Apple has bought 80 companies. They average, they buy a few a year. Some of them are big, some are small. And then in the peak, they were probably averaging, like they were buying 1 company a month back in like 2019, 2020. And if you look at their acquisitions, you can go back and look at what they bought in the timelines. And you go, oh yeah, like they were thinking about changing this, getting into ads and locking out Facebook. They were thinking about this 8 years ago. Like, look at the companies they're buying. They're buying ad companies. Like, I know why they're buying ad companies now.
Yeah. See, and I mean, good on them, because like you said, like they can't stay that young, innovative, like startup forever. So they get that acquisitions, and then someday they just become a big bloated bureaucracy of a company, I guess. Not, I say that, but not in a bad way, but just at some point you're a massive company. So you kind of aren't as nimble as you used to be when you were, like you said, the two pizza rule, you know?
Yeah, everyone loves the underdog. It turns out if the underdog has catastrophic success, eventually he's going to be the villain.
Yeah.
that's just how we think about companies in life, I guess. If you're too successful, it's bad. If you're the everyone loves the underdog. I'm always rooting for Rocky.
Yeah. Well, we grew up that way, you know. That was our experience when we were a kid, you know, Rocky or Bloodsport, you know, like, oh, how is Jean-Claude Van Damme going to do this? But
did you just threw out a Jean-Claude Van Damme reference, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. To my mom's mom's chagrin, she that's what I grew up on, you know. It was like Terminator, Commando, like all that kind of stuff. Nice. So okay, this is my perspective, and it could be completely wrong. So back in the day, my understanding is that the government, like trying to go to the moon, was the leading edge, like the most cutting edge place to be if you're trying to solve problems. And then technology was like downstream from what the government and like NASA was trying to achieve. But nowadays it's almost like the government can't keep up with what public companies and all these companies out there can produce. So why did that change?
Well, yeah, I'd say a few things. So if you go back to World War II, there's a couple of good books about it. But if you look at this, there's a book called The Secret History of Silicon Valley. And it goes back to how did Silicon Valley actually have all of this, like these tech companies? Like, where do they actually all come from? And if you go from down to down south, an actual Silicon Valley up to the Bay Area and San Francisco, back in World War II, all of the government technology that we use to fight World War II was built there. Those are all defense companies. So Silicon Valley was built on the back of national security. And what had happened over time, there was a switch in the Cold War, and I can't remember exactly when, but the model kind of changed where the government started instituting processes that were they basically adopted it from Ford Motor Company, if you believe it or not. So Robert McNamara took over in the Pentagon as the Secretary of Defense, and he brought with him a bunch of the executives from Ford, and they tried to implement a bunch of business models and of how do we have predictable planning and how do I get to the nth degree of metrics and all of these processes to drive stability. And so that's what you did. So you're trading speed for stability and predictability. And so that's what happened. And so all of the things that came out of that, no kidding, is how everything that we have today was built then. The PBBE and the fiscal years and how that actually works, all that was in the 1960s timeframe. And what happened was it's still from the 1960s and the world has changed. And so I'd say probably in the late 90s, where you would find breakthroughs started to change. There was a few reasons why. And so I'd say in the 80s, you have government funded research and you would, bleeding edge stuff, DARPA's, built the internet, all that kind of stuff. And now, 20 years later, when you look at where the money is and the rise of even venture capital, they're making bets and tech companies. You'll see just the amount of money where it is. It's not even close. I want to say it's 10 to 1. It's probably 30 to 1 dollars. So for every dollar that the government invests in S&T or R&D to technology development, it's 30 times more money in the commercial sector doing that. And so they're able to, they don't have, the federal acquisitions regulations. They don't have colors of money in fiscal years. They don't have continuing resolutions. They don't have congressional oversight, right? It's a free market economy in that regard. So you can move as at the speed of business. It turns out the speed of business is the speed of life, the real world, where the speed of government is something completely different. And the longer that disconnect remains, I think everyone, probably in the past 5 years, everyone's like, oh, we have a problem. The industry is running circles around what the government is able to do just because of our processes. Even if we could buy, and then we get to the things back to earlier, say a company we built something, this exquisite technology, the government wants to buy it. Well, now the latest thing is the government wants to own, they want to own the architecture. They want to own the tech stack. Like, okay, well, who's going to maintain it? Because like the guys who built it, they're not GS15s.
Yeah, they're like,
I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't think you're going to be able to do this. So when you look at government reference architectures, open systems architectures, and things like that, you can speed a lot. But at the end of the day, like when you field something, someone has to maintain and sustain it. And there's a conversation to be had of who has the expertise to do that. And if it's going to be the government just contracting back to the people who know what they're doing to do it, then you're like, well, what's the whole point of having this this reference? Like, who cares what the reference is? You're not doing anything with it. You might as well just keep the open standard and then change what's running on the open standard instead of wanting your own operating system. That's government. The government owns it. So it's an interesting conversation right now with I was joking with someone the other day during an engagement. I was like, if you could tell me one example of a government run software program that is like a catastrophic success, I will show you 100 that are catastrophic failures. Yeah. I just got 2 words for you: pecs and jumps. Like, all right. Like if we can't even figure out how to schedule, do squadron scheduling and, do mission planning, like those are 2 basic stuff that everyone touches every day. And somehow we're, God, I don't know, 15 years into trying to fix it, and we keep just making it worse. So
I think one of the frustrating things is at least in scheduling, the DoD seems more interested in finding a solution, and there's a lot of companies working in that space, but they seem so uninterested in changing mission planning, to something that represents some new technology. I mean, you go to a red flag, and who else around the world would say you're going to put 70 aircraft in the same airspace, and they're all worth multiple millions of dollars at least, and you're going to plan all this, the deconfliction, the timing, the everything, on a literal whiteboard and transfer that to an Excel document that may or may not have macros in it, or like formulas. But that's it. Like, that is the extent of our mission planning.
That has not changed in 30 years.
Yeah.
We fought Desert Storm on that same whiteboard and probably that same Excel document.
And that's the frustrating thing, where it's good that in some areas they are very interested in finding solutions. Maybe it's just such a niche solution that they're like, this is very operator centric, that it's not that noticeable to anybody who doesn't mission plan and especially on a large scale.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think again, you go back to like, well, what's the impact? There's only how many PEC systems are there in use? I don't know. I'm making it up. Maybe there's 100, right? Like, oh, well, the business case just isn't there for us to build something. Like, well, yeah, it is. You see all the people that you're pissing off every day, like they're all going to leave. That's your problem. You have a retention problem because their quality of life sucks because you're giving them like tech from the 1990s and you're asking them to go do miracles with it. Like, how about you start with like the low hanging fruit and fix some of these pain points? And when you say you're going to fix something, I don't know, how about you follow through and do it? Like, show me your report card. Like, here are all the things that you've promised over the past 10 years that you're going to fix. None of them have been fixed. Or, hey, did we fix this? We failed here. Like, great. Like, that would be nice to know. But lots of broken promises. That trail of tears to the exit door is
yeah. Well,
it's a thing.
It's frustrating because everything's downstream from the schedule. It's the scheduler's life is terrible. The ADO, his life is terrible because he has to, buy the schedule and then sell the schedule to the DO. So all of their lives are suboptimal. And then a bad schedule affects the entire squadron. And so you're like, everybody is feels the pain of the schedule. If only we could solve that, which we've talked with Ops Lab in the past, and we actually just talked with Duality the other day. So that'll be coming out in a couple weeks. But yeah, there's companies out there that are trying to solve it, but that's the question: is like, how does it replace PEX? Like, that's going from hey, this Cyber 2 made good and it's a MVP that works, to PEX is gone, this took its place. Like, that is quite a bit different.
Yeah, I'd say the PEX, the more you learn about PEX, you go, oh, this is way more complicated of a problem. So the side of PEX that, you know, as an operator, fighter pilot deals with is like 10%. Like there's a maintenance side of PEX. There's a whole other like galaxy of stuff that they use PEX for over there. So there has to be some kind of continuity until they, you know, replace PEX entirely. But yeah, you could do your schedule. There's a whole bunch of things to do. Like, you know, the Air Force, you know, by Friday morning in a normal fighter squadron, unless things have changed, by Friday morning, you have like everyone kind of sits in the scheduling and like kind of slaps the table and go. They spend probably an hour and a half moving the final touches to make the perfect schedule for the next Monday through Friday, like fly week. And then no kidding, but by the time that the end of day, that Friday that they just like blessed the schedule, something's already changed.
Yeah.
So I used to keep track of like how many things would change throughout the week. I'm a 2-time recovering scheduler. So, so I did it a few different assignments. So I appreciate it. And it was like, I used to put a dot, and I remember like, I didn't tell anyone I was doing it for just my own experiment. And the end of the week, you know, you don't clean the board from like, you know, this week, next week, as you're building, you're like, what? Where are all these dots? And it was like the DO was asking. I'm like, oh, you mean on Friday? Like, hey, it's Friday. Like, there's a dot next to every single puck on the board. They're like, yeah, why is that? Like, that means that I have literally moved every single. That is not the schedule you approved. Like, I moved every single puck because of that cascading effects of like one thing leads to another, and you know, if this happens, I like the Navy technique, which is, you know, day +1 +2, and so you have your availability, and you just go, am I flying like AM go or PM go? And if I'm flying AM go, like keep me in the AM go, and if I'm not available, like, you know, Tuesday, don't schedule me. I have an office day, and then they go, all right. And then you just figure out like, hey, we're on the schedule. Great. What do you want to do? And it's, you know, plan early, plan often. But for the Air Force, so these people like, oh, I have this ride in 5 days. Let me go start studying and prepping. Or the Navy's like, what am I doing tomorrow? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Which again, like all it is like broken dreams on the week out.
Oh, yeah.
Like me, like oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you show me, it's like the perfect sortie. Like, show me a fighter pilot who's ever flown a perfect sortie, and I'll show you a schedule that's been executed as planned, right?
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like, you build a schedule that assumes that you're going to have success on a day prior. There's not going to be weather problem. But if only you could build a schedule that didn't explode because of, you know, the Friday fallout that rolls into Monday, which rolls into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Like, I don't think there is a way to build a schedule with upgrades and all those things without that, like the following days rely on the days prior. But maybe if there's a computer that just does the reroll, at least it saves humans from trying to do it and then, you know, stepping on someone's office day because they were like, oh shoot, I forgot about that. Like, I mean, I can only imagine.
Yeah, you should be able to put in it's kind of like the puck board, which for like the tanker planning, you should be able to just, here are my inputs, here are my priorities, and you go compute, and it basically gives you, here's your suggested schedule, and you go, I don't like that, compute again, like, okay, this is pretty close. I just move 1 or 2 things around, and like, I just skip to the good stuff, right? Like, yeah. Like the value of a scheduler is like that last 10%. Mm-hmm. Like, that's where you really want the hands on the pucks, making those decisions, because you have the context. But like the first 90% of it is like, that is not hard work. That is just tedious waste of time.
Well, and I think that's the nice thing, because a lot of these automated schedulers will do exactly that. I like that formation. Leave it as is, and you lock it. All right. You know, I always forget the name where you're doing all the weaponeering with all like the 1,000 bombs or whatever. It's not roulette. It's it's like a gambling something where
like a Monte Carlo.
Monte Carlo, exactly.
Simulation?
Like, yeah, okay. The Monte Carlo, where you're just like, all right, send it, figure out the best solution, and we'll go from there, kind of thing. And so yeah, I mean, people are out there, they're trying to solve it, so that's good.
I learned recently, and I've already forgotten, so I'm going to screw this up. I should probably Google this as we're talking here. I actually learned what Monte Carlo actually is. Like everyone's like, oh, it's a Monte Carlo. So run the simulation. All it means is that it's a time limited like permutations that it's running, And at the end of it, it goes, this is what I got based on the time. There's another kind of permutation predictor where it's not time based, it's like solutions based, and that one's called like, Las Vegas or something. It's got some other like geographic, of course, like who comes up with these names? Yeah.
But I like that one more.
I cannot remember. It's definitely, I want to say, I don't know the name of it, but it's definitely a geographic location. I was like, that's funny. Whoever came up with these names, like 30, 40 years ago, like that's funny.
Yeah, but I like that more because now it's not, hey, my solution is based off my time constraint. It's based off of my scheduling or availability or whatever it is, but at least it's a better constraint than, hey, you gave me 6 seconds, and it's like, well, that's not helpful. So yeah. What are some of the things, obviously you've got your hands in a lot of stuff in the innovation space. What's something cool that you've kind of seen recently before we get out of here?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. Nothing really jumps out at me because there's literally, I don't know. I probably see 500 things a week when I'm building the newsletter.
Yeah.
And so I'm running an experiment right now. I realized like I can't put everything in the newsletter, and I was spending a lot of time just making choices of where that cut line's supposed to be, because I can only have so much space in the newsletter, and it's just going to get overwhelming. And it comes out every Sunday morning. So I was like, well, I have all this good stuff, and I just haven't been able to use it because it's just below the cut line. And I'm like, so I've spent a lot of time doing that. So finally I was like, what if I just took the stuff below the cut line and then just released it separately? So I created kind of I'm running an experiment on LinkedIn because LinkedIn has a built-in newsletter function.
Oh, nice.
Where on Tuesday mornings, I'm putting all of the saved rounds that I couldn't put in the newsletter. I'm putting all the saved rounds you saw on Sunday, and then I have like below the cut line and like, here are all the other ones. And so I think this last Tuesday, I probably had like, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12, maybe 15 saved rounds. And I had like 30 or 40 things that I just could not fit. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in the defense tech space right now. So it's, instead of, singling out one, I would say, sign up for the newsletter. I'd really appreciate it. It's a lot of work. However much work you think it is, it's probably, you're underestimating. It's a lot of my time, but it's a labor of love. I appreciate it. And I really enjoy the notes and the feedback that I get. So I'm going to keep doing it. Sometimes, I love doing it some days, and some days I'm like, man, I just got to get this thing done because there's a lot of people counting on me, and I don't want to let them all down. So.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it because I, having kind of an understanding of the space and stuff, and then obviously you have a very good understanding of it. It is super useful information, and it's stuff that reading it, you're like, hey, that could move the needle, or this is why the needle's not moving, or we talking about a couple months back, you had, I think it was a couple months now, the Valley of Death stuff, and there's just so much information that it's because you produce it every week. It's very topical. So I've been, I follow the Merge on Instagram and LinkedIn, obviously. And so seeing some of the Instagram pictures and articles and stories you put up, it's cool. So I highly recommend themerge.co. Is that it, right? For the website?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. www.themerge.co.
Perfect. So we'll everybody go check that out. I'll throw it in the show notes as we did last time, and I highly recommend it because I read it every Sunday, and then I follow all the stuff on LinkedIn. But Pako, we'll have to do this again. Thanks for coming out here and chatting. And then sorry everybody, but Bender, he fell off a while ago, and we just let him go. We didn't even slow down the recording.
Standard F-35 guy doesn't make the push, I tell you.
Yeah. You'd think timing would be easy in that thing.
Yeah.